Good evening. Welcome to our Energion Hangout this Tuesday night. I'm going to be talking with Dr. Bob LaRochelle about Christian education and ecumenism. Let's invite the Lord to be with us. Lord, you have told us that your church is to be with one spirit, and I pray tonight that a spirit of peace and unity, cooperation, one spirit in the body of Christ will reign. In the name of Jesus, amen. Bob, I'm going to welcome you here tonight. Bob LaRochelle is the author of several books, including Crossing the Street, in which he tells his own spiritual journey with a lot of good lessons. I believe the most recent book, sometimes I forget what order I do these things in, Home United, talking about a home where the partners are of different faiths. And so he talks a great deal about ecumenism. So welcome tonight, Bob.
Thank you, Henry. Appreciate it. Glad we're doing this tonight.
Okay, we're going to work you fairly hard.
Okay.
Talking about Christian education, which I think sometimes ends up being a kind of done more by default than by plan. So we're going to talk about how people might plan. But first, since you talk about ecumenism, and I'm going to talk to you, the questions that I have for you tonight deal most directly with ecumenism in the Christian education program.
Okay.
So let's start out first. Since you wrote Crossing the Street, which was before Pope Francis, that was during, Pope Benedict was the Pope, and you discussed Protestant Roman Catholic relations during that time. Mm-hmm. So a lot of water has gone under the bridge. The principles are still there, but what would you say is the state of ecumenical dialogue, ecumenical activities, especially at the congregational level?
I think at the congregational level, there isn't, in my view, enough happening. I don't want to call it a state of inertia. That may be too strong, but the experience that I've had, not only in my own area, but in talking to other people in various parts of the country, is that on the local level, in most areas of the country, there isn't a whole lot happening. I mean, you alluded to some changes in the Roman Catholic Church, and I think that there is a fresh ecumenical spirit between mainline Protestants and Catholics that's been engendered by the spirit of Pope Francis, for sure. But I don't see a lot of work going on. I don't want to say that we're in our separate camps per se, but I think a lot of times things are limited to the occasional service. Churches might get together to do something around Christmas time, maybe around Lent, but as an ongoing reality, I don't think we're where we need to be perfectly honest with you.
Okay, so to an extent, if I'm hearing you right, cooperation is taking place sometimes in the terms of like talks between leaders at the higher level,
right?
But really filtering down to the pews, we more or less go to the church that we go to, and that's what we learn about. Is that what you?
I really think that's correct. I know that that's been my experience here in the Northeast to a great extent, and I think that the ecumenical sense, just to say that it's permeating local congregations, I can't say I see it. No.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with somebody that was talking about the range of views that I publish, because
right.
Energion Publications is definitely not just interdenominational, but we try to cut a very wide interdenominational swath with our authors. And somebody was asking me about things that I wouldn't publish, and I said, well, the one really fatal sin as far as getting a book published with me would be apathy.
Right.
That to me it seems like, we argue about a lot of problems in the church, but one of the things that seems to me to be really the killer is just not caring that much.
Absolutely. Right. Yeah.
And so that's probably what one of the great things that you would need to be educating about.
I do think what happens on the local level is, for a variety of reasons, which we don't need to get into right now, but for a variety of reasons, people do get caught up in the quote business of their local church and the concerns of their local church. My argument would be that one could enliven one's local congregation more by reaching out and embracing an ecumenical spirit and doing things in conjunction with other churches in the community, and I'd also extend that to an interfaith approach as well. But for now, we're looking at ecumenism as we should be, and I think that the church can be enlivened by that kind of ecumenical spirit, just on basic things.
I think that's something I've been talking to people about, because I've heard this. For example, I remember one of these Facebook memes was a picture of a homeless child here in the United States, or at least that's what they expected you to believe it was. And the text over the picture was, we can't help foreign refugees until there are no homeless children in the United States. And my response to that is, if you don't reach out, you'll never finish the task inside.
Absolutely.
And so I guess, but ecumenism adds another layer to that, which is you're so busy with the business of the church that you can't reach out to your other churches, when I would suspect that the problem there is that reaching out, and when I use you here, I'm not referring to you personally,
right,
referring to church congregations, that the answer to taking care of the business of your church, taking care of your own community, may well be in cooperation with the church down the road.
Absolutely. And if I could give an example of something, I really believe that oftentimes people shy away from these kind of ventures because they think, well, we already have enough to do. What are we going to do now? We're going to add another committee, a committee on ecumenism within our congregation. I don't think it has to be that kind of bureaucratic situation. I'll give you just one example. In my local congregation, which I'm serving, which right now, is an ELCA, Lutheran Church congregation, we are going to have a youth worship service in early November. And what we're doing is we are intentionally reaching out to other congregations. My goal, I'm the person coordinating it, my goal is, as best as possible, to fill that sanctuary with kids from a wide variety of local churches. Lutheran, Methodist, United Church of Christ, Episcopal, Presbyterian, on and on and on. So we're intentionally trying to reach out. That's an initiative on our part. In short-term time, it takes a little bit of work to do that, but it isn't the kind of overwhelming task that forming a committee might be. It's very doable. It's a very realistic thing. I think we have to look to do that sort of thing. And that's just one example. And my feeling, Henry, is that, let's say ideally we have these kids coming together in our sanctuary, we're having good worship experience, and we're having good pizza afterwards and all that sort of thing. I think that naturally flows into next steps where maybe we can talk about kids from these churches coming together and doing something with respect to a local food bank or a local homeless shelter. I mean, I know in our part of the country we certainly have considerable need. I think when you get people together, you can start talking about those kinds of things. I think people need to think creatively in local congregations and just look in terms of what is one thing that I might be able to do to help advance ecumenism. Yeah, if that makes any sense. Yeah.
Well, actually, it makes a lot of sense. And as I'm listening to it, I will give you a warning that I may never get to the list of questions that I actually sent you ahead of time.
That's okay. That's all right.
We've come into a topic that's near and dear to my heart. When you talk about filling the sanctuary with these kids from all the different churches and reaching out, let me give you a brief experience.
Great.
When I was working with an interdenominational interchurch prayer group here in our area, and again, this is back in prehistoric times. The glaciers were receding, and that's in any case. That shows you how long ago it was. But in any case, we had the discussion when you're talking about how do you fill the church, and then the discussion was, well, what do you do in the prayer meeting? And we went into this chicken and egg discussion, which I think got on my nerves somewhat, which is, well, why do we make the church, say, shall we say, friendly to Baptist believers, or say to believers who have a high church, when there aren't any of them there? And I was having to say, well, if you don't make it friendly, right, why do you think they'll start? So when you talk about reaching out, let me just ask you, do you reach out to these other congregations for a contribution to how the service will occur, or is this all hosted? Just tell us a bit about this reaching out, because I think for some people, they sit there and go, how do we get this started? How do we take the first step?
Sure. Well, I invite them to attend, to be part of it, and then working through their leadership, I also invite them to contribute ideas for the worship service. If there is particular talent that the leaders in those congregations are aware of among their kids, musical talent, dramatic talent, whatever the case may be, we might structure the service in such a way that we could help that be expressed as well. I think it requires kind of an openness to the Spirit. It requires an openness, to the gifts that are present within the youth of the various congregations who are coming. And it does require a lot of dialogue and a lot of nuts and bolts organizational things. But, once I have a sense from a local congregation that maybe they're going to send 10 kids, I would say to the pastor or to whomever might be the director of the youth group, okay, what can you tell me about the kids who are coming? Are there any kids who, have particular talents that they express within your congregation? We could integrate that into the service. So I don't go in. I'm doing the invitations, and we're having a service in the sanctuary where I serve as pastor, but I don't go into it necessarily with a preset notion that we're not going to be flexible and we're just going to do it the way that we do it in our church. Okay, so I hope that makes sense.
Oh yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to ask, because I think for some people the problem that comes up with ecumenical activities is ecumenical activities become, I'm going to invite you to attend my church, listen to me, listen to my choir. And that does happen. I mean, that happens all the time when somebody says, okay, we're interested in reaching out to the rest of the community, let's bring them into our church.
Oh yeah.
Well, they watch us do it our way.
Right.
What you're talking about is you've got a dialogue at the members level that's bringing in these young people from around the community, but you've also got a dialogue at the leaders level where you're saying, what talents do we have? We're flexible. This may be our sanctuary, but we're interested in doing this in a way that is interesting, comfortable, and, uplifting to all of you.
Right. I mean, what we're going to do is, we're going to gather. We're going to gather. We're going to praise God. We're going to listen to the Word. We're going to reflect on the Word. And I'm offering communion as part of this. Okay, we'll celebrate communion, and then we'll go forth. And I hope that the going forth involves integrating what we've done at this service with real service beyond the walls of the church. So I think it's very exciting, and I go back to what I was saying a few minutes ago, that it need not be a bureaucratic mess. A lot of it has to do with person-to-person contact. Once I get a sense of who might be coming, getting on the phone, emailing, texting, talking to local youth leaders, talking to them about the kids in their local congregation, and seeing what we can do together to have a good service for that particular evening that might flow into some other things. But I think that sort of thing, churches looking at creative ways to be together, needs to be done at various levels within church education. I think it obviously needs to be done with adults, and there are ways, I think, to do it with younger children as well.
Yeah, I think sometimes probably establishing a committee is the way that you kill something.
Oh, absolutely.
I remember we were having a pastors conference, a few years ago, and the guest speaker was major director or a evangelism coordinator from another one of the Methodist conferences. This was at a Methodist church, and I remember during the Q&A time, one of the pastors there at the conference started out his question like this. He started out, "We have this evangelism committee." And as the speaker, this guy interrupted him and said, "Stop right there." He says, "First thing that you do is get rid of your evangelism committee." Right. He says, "When you have an evangelism committee, people point to it and think that somehow you're doing evangelism." He says, and that's not likely to be the case, which occurs to me. I was saying, if you established an ecumenical affairs committee, it might be the best sign that you aren't doing any ecumenical.
Correct. So, I mean, honestly, to people listening to this, watching this, I would just say, just try to tap into your own ecumenical spirit, and just don't be afraid to just envision something, just something that could be done on the local level. And then I would use the old slogan, just do it. Come up with an idea. Hey, do you want to do this? Talk to leaders in other churches, and float the idea, see if it has any life. And if that idea doesn't have life, get some input about some ideas that may, and really work at doing it.
Well, at this point, I really do want to get into some, at least part of the questions that I intended to ask you, because it leads right in here. In a congregation, and again, I'll tell you a little story of a conversation that I had with a pastor. He was being assigned to a small church in a rural community, and they asked this man to, they said, we want our church to grow, and we want to reach out to our community and just bring people in here through the doors, make a plan for it and present it to the church. And he did, and had the list of things that would need to happen to the church if they were going to bring in, and they'd mentioned particularly younger members. He made a list of things that the church would have to do in order to do that. And after he had presented his plan in a church-wide vote, they voted not to. They said that they would rather stay the way they are. Wow. And the reason I bring that up is, as a pastor, because I know you have a passion for this, as a pastor, what do you do in terms of Christian education, whether this is from the pulpit or other venues that you have? I don't know if you have small groups. I know a lot of Lutheran churches don't have, like a regular Sunday school, but you probably have catechism classes at some point in the church cycle. What venues do you use to educate people on, and how just give us a sense? Let's say you're the person in the church that wants to open these ideas to people. How do you get that started?
Okay. Well, we do have an active adult education program, right? So we offer regular adult education classes, which I coordinate, and I think that an impetus for things that can happen within a church come from having a solid adult education core. But we're a small church, but we also offer a youth group for our adolescent members, and that's in conjunction with two other churches. The church that I serve also houses a Pentecostal church, an African-American Pentecostal church in our building. They worship at a different time on Sunday. We have a great connection with that church, and the kids from that church are an active part of our youth group, which we also have shared with the local Episcopal church. So our youth group is three-pronged. It's Lutheran, Episcopal, and Pentecostal, which I think is a nice it's a nice witness. And we have a small Sunday school that does.
Let me interrupt you there for a second. Yeah. That's almost like the triangle that I did when I did my Y Energion, had evangelical, charismatic, and liberal on the 3 points.
Right.
as bringing people in. So I just got to say, I like your three elements there.
It's really exciting, and I can also say that apart from the area of education per se, the two churches that are housed in the same building, ours and the Pentecostal church, have just really a nice relationship. We do a good number of things together. I've been invited to preach in their church. Could it use some progress and some growth? Yeah, of course. But I think the progress that we've already made is significant, and that's great. So, and we do have a small Sunday school. Some weeks there may just be one child there, to be honest with you. Other weeks there are more people, but we do a weekly children's message, and whatever children are there are then dismissed to Sunday school. We're fortunate we have some excellent Sunday school teachers, and we're now in the process of looking at some ways to reach out to families in the community as well. So I think I have some ideas about how one approaches Christian education at different age levels, but I would say that we have the right kind of balance in that our church doesn't just see Christian education as something that equals Sunday school only, but that it's a lifetime kind of a thing, which I think is really important.
So now, though, you have this variety in the education, I assume the relationships between the churches would go into it. But do you shape the messages, for example, when you preach, in order to, how should I say, build this spirit of cooperation, ecumenical spirit? And do you ever do adult education, for example, on other denominations, other faiths?
All the time. Yeah, I've done particular programs on Catholicism. I've done programs looking at different Protestant denominations. I'm a firm believer that with respect to adolescent Christian education, one has to help expose young people to the wide Christian tradition, and that one has to really kind of go ecumenical with respect to that as well. So, all the time. Then in my own preaching, from the pulpit, I utilize a lot of different sources, and I'll be very intentional about addressing ecumenism.
Okay, I think it would probably be valuable for people to know you are not originally ordained as a ELCA pastor. You're ordained United Church of Christ.
I'm ordained United Church of Christ, yeah.
And so you're serving an ELCA congregation. There's an ecumenical factor as soon as you walk onto the property, so to speak.
That's right, yeah. And I was raised Roman Catholic, as you well know, because
right.
You and I have had conversations. You published my books, and yeah, I'm a UCC pastor, and without getting into all kinds of denominational minutia and all that sort of thing, I'm serving at the ELCA church because there is a formula of agreement that was crafted in the year 2000 among the ELCA, the United Church of Christ, the Presbyterian Church USA, and the Reformed Church in America, which allows for us to serve as needed in each other's pulpits. Yeah. Which is...
Okay, so I'm going to probably take you to something as we're beginning to run short on time, and I want you to talk a little bit about your books.
Okay.
And how they might be used in ecumenical education, because you've written material that aims that direction.
Right. Well,
and but before you do that, I wanted to ask one last question about the process in the church. Do you vary your liturgy at all on an ecumenical basis? With or without, let's say if you're doing interchurch services, say something about how liturgy functions in ecumenical activities.
Okay, in ecumenical activities, I would try to use resources from the different traditions represented there, and maybe even sometimes from traditions that may not be represented there. Okay,
you would not be uncomfortable then doing a worship service that really was not either a Lutheran or a UCC liturgy, as long as you had the material for it.
No, I mean, one thing that I firmly believe is that when push comes to shove, if you're looking at liturgy, four basic things are happening if there is communion involved in the liturgy, right? People are a gathering, and that's an act of worship in itself. The very act of gathering. We hear the word, okay? We allow the word to touch us. So we have gathering, we have word, where we share communion. There's the meal aspect of worship, and then we are sent forth to mission, and the act of sending is an act of worship. So, within that structure of gathering, hearing the word, sharing a meal, and sending, in my view, there's a lot of flexibility as far as how you do it. Okay. As a matter of fact, you mentioned ecumenical worship. I like to look at our regular weekly worship services as ecumenical worship as well. I mean, I like to draw from worship resources of different traditions within Christianity. So it's not unusual for me to, pull a hymn out or have us sing a hymn which may not be in the Lutheran hymnal, but maybe from a different resource. If you have a copyright license as a church, you can use a wide variety in hymnody. So I think if a person is looking to be intentionally ecumenical, there's all kinds of exciting ways that one can do it.
Yeah, I think that would be one of the keys and this isn't probably something that you put on and take off. You're either going to be ecumenically minded or you're not.
Yeah, really. Yeah.
You can't say I'm going to be ecumenically minded one Sunday a year or something.
No, my suggestion to anybody listening to this is please consider being ecumenically minded. Okay, it's what we're all about. I mean, but the prayer is that we may all be one. Right. So, but about my book,
I think that's one of those prayers that we may pray without really wanting the answer sometimes.
Right. I'm with you on that one.
Yeah, I think I've heard somebody say that very often, we sing our lies because we don't really mean, all to Jesus I surrender.
Right. Exactly.
Not so much.
Right. Take my life and let it be.
Yeah, right. But I think also we often pray for things that we don't actually want.
Right. Right.
So, right. In any case, listen, that means that I really need to get you on here to talk about liturgy.
Sure.
At some point,
love to.
Just that talking about the basis of liturgy is just very interesting. What do we want to have in a worship service? And I really liked your summary, but as I'm already running down further than I intended before I say this, I'd really like you to talk a little bit about the books that you have or have in preparation.
Sure.
Because several of them are valuable curriculum items for an ecumenical program. I'll hold up here just to make it obvious here is what Protestants need to know about Roman Catholics, what Roman Catholics need to know about Protestants. That's probably short of going all to interfaith, that's about the biggest ecumenical divide that we have.
Right.
And of course, crossing the street, since you were raised and educated as a Roman Catholic and are now a United Church of Christ pastor serving a Lutheran congregation.
Yeah.
So take it from there.
What I think, Henry, is that if I were to make a suggestion to anybody wanting to do some education in the local congregation around issues of ecumenism, I'd suggest maybe start with Crossing the Street, because yes, it's about differences between Catholicism and Protestantism, but I also think it paints a broader picture based in terms of what I was saying, that we can draw from a wide variety of resources in our own spiritual and ecclesial lives as well. So I would say that would be the starting point. I would encourage people to read that, not just because I want people to read my book, but I mean, I do think that I wrote it with an intention to be a good practical overview of ecumenism in terms of the two largest groups that usually one would think about when one thinks about ecumenism, Catholicism and Protestantism, though I do allude to Orthodoxy in there as well, and I don't want to downplay Orthodoxy.
Let me mention on that, having come from Seventh-day Adventist background and being United Methodist,
right,
which doesn't sound anything like it, crossing the street resonated with my experience all along the way.
Right, that's great.
So just to let people know, this is, the experience is Roman Catholic to Protestant.
There it is. Yeah.
It covers a lot of other journeys as well.
Right, and Henry, I've heard that from other people as well. So I appreciate that, and I do think in terms of the nuts and bolts, distilling differences and similarities between Catholicism and Protestantism, applying that to the local context of where people may be living and all. I think those two shorter books that you referred to can be very helpful. I know, in my own congregation, there's several people who have read them and have found them to be very helpful. And I also would want to mention the most recent book that I had published with Energion, which is A Home United, and that's about marriage. It's about marital relationships, and it's particularly addressing situations where people may come from different backgrounds, be they different backgrounds within Christianity, interfaith backgrounds, or situations where, say, here you have a husband who is agnostic, really, and his wife may be a mainline Protestant, who really believes in attending church and being part of a local congregation. How do you deal with working some of the issues out? So how do you put ecumenism and interfaith conviction into practice in the most sacred of all interpersonal relationships? So I would think that would be a good place to go to. And I'm really excited about a book I'm writing right now, which is dealing with faith in the adolescent. It's a book that's going to be addressed to adolescents, because, and this will be an entirely not different topic, but an entirely different direction. I really firmly believe that when a local church community is working with adolescents, that's prime time to really delve into some serious ecumenism and interfaith issues. I really believe that. I think the way that one teaches, obviously, is different from age group to age group, and I think adolescence is a wonderful time to really move into these areas. So.
Okay, let me just make sure that everybody's aware. You're a bivocational pastor.
I am. I'm a school counselor. Yeah, I'm at a public high
So
school.
that's your background for dealing with that latter book. I just wanted to get that in there. We've run 3 minutes overtime, so I'm going to call it a night.
Well,
and I think I asked you one of the page full of questions I sent you, and we talked about other things.
We'll have further conversations in the future.
Yeah, we'll I hope to have you back for conversations specifically about liturgy and its impact on the church and how you do it, because I think that's probably, most of us do liturgy out of habit, not out of an intention.
Right.
And that might not be the best plan.
I'd love to do that. I'd love to do that. Thank you.
Okay, well, again, thank you. And I'll give you any last words for about 30 seconds, and we'll call it a night.
My last words are very simple. Just try something. Dream something ecumenically and try it. Just one little thing. Don't be afraid to do it. You don't have to form this big committee to do it. Just have some creativity and gather some other people around you, and it can be very surprising. It's very serendipitous. So thanks.
Okay. Thank you again, Bob, and good night, everyone. I hope to see you next Tuesday night for our Energion Tuesday night hangout, and I will be on Thursday night on my YouTube channel. I'm talking about perspectives on the Apostle Paul. It's Thursday night, 7 p.m. Central. It's on my personal Energion channel. I mean, my personal YouTube channel. With that, good night.